Hey friends, this walkaway movement, I know a lot of people have been sharing their experiences and their story of how it kind of led them to where they are today. I kind of wanted to do the same thing. Storytelling is important, I think. It's a way of communicating that people seem to really resonate with versus other forms of communication. So, long story short, I kind of started a spiritual journey 8 years ago. That's kind of a whole other story in itself, but it led to me being a very left-leaning person. Uh, a couple years before this past election, I was a big Bernie supporter. Went to his rallies. Was big into a lot of those left ideas. With the hierarchy, the 1%, patriarchy, capitalism, you know, the oppressor versus the oppressed, all that kind of stuff. And I was what you'd call the social justice warrior. I did, a handful of protests. I would have been Antifa if it went any further, but the elections came, and towards when it got towards the very end of the elections, I could see people really changing, really drawing lines in the sand. I saw a lot of people treating each other like they're enemies. And with me being like way left with like the light and love kind of thing, I never saw anybody on the right as an enemy. They had a different opinion of mine that I definitely strongly disagreed with, but they weren't enemies. But I saw a lot of people kind of making that conclusion, calling people enemies and just getting really nasty in social media. And it just kind of left a really weird taste in my mouth right after the elections. So I kind of started distancing myself a little bit from that. I definitely didn't agree with, Hillary. I'm still glad, I never voted for her, but I definitely saw myself getting stuck in this echo chamber of ideologies. And when I started noticing everyone else around me kind of like that, it really just started getting me to question things. So before that, since I was stuck in such a hardcore echo chamber, I never really fully listened to the conservative view. And it kind of forced myself into that after the elections. Like, well, this guy's president, half the country voted for him, or half the voting population, and I know a lot of Republicans. None of them are evil people. So, okay, what's going on? And it was, that's when I kind of started this like distancing myself and really questioning the other side, or questioning everything all over again. And it was the first time I really started listening to the conservative view. I began to understand their point of view and agree with a lot of it, and I could see both sides of liberals and conservatives. But for the first time, I really started understanding conservative, the power of the individual, and working hard and getting what you deserve for working hard, or not playing the victim card so much, and really just working your way through adversity and taking all the opportunities this country has, and making something out of yourself. And it really started resonating with me because I'm a small business owner, and I realized for those 5 years of being really left, being a little too liberal, I was having problems even in my own company. When you give too much, and it's natural human instinct, you give an inch, they take a mile, right? Same thing with that. I was being too liberal in a lot of the ways I allowed things in the company, and profits started slipping, and people started taking advantage of it. And I really had to rope that in, and that's where this understanding of some of the conservative view started coming into play, seeing that people need to be incentivized for things to want to shoot for things and acquire things. And if you just give too much, people are just going to take and not work for it. So there's one side to the other that you can really kind of understand, and it started making a lot more sense to me. the extremes on both sides are bad, but the overlapping in the middle, each side has valid points. I mean, I understand why there's liberals and I understand why there's conservatives, and during this whole year of kind of going through this transformation and starting understanding conservative viewpoints and realizing the need for both, I kind of stumbled onto Jordan Peterson, which at that point he largely resonated with me because I had already started coming to a lot of these kinds of conclusions, and he really just drove it home for me in putting a puzzle together. I not necessarily agree with absolutely everything he says, but the one thing that really made sense is everything is complicated business. When we have 7 billion people on the planet, you can't just say oh, it's just the hierarchy, the patriarchy, and the 1%, and that explains all 7 billion interactions on the planet. It's like, no, it's more complicated than that. There's so many multi-varied levels and variables and scenarios that play into everything, and it's not all inherently bad. Men are not all inherently bad. It's not the evil patriarchy. Yes, there's toxic masculinity, of course. There's toxic femininity. The capitalism. It's not inherently bad. Yes, there is toxicity, extreme points on that as well, where greed and corruption are wreaking havoc on in certain areas of our life. But it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole picture. I mean, all these systems have a lot of good in it. There's always the fat in the middle that's good, and it's the extremes at the end that are bad. And Jordan always talks about the extremes, and it really made me understand that in a lot of different ways. And he's consistently talking about how the left and the right need each other. It kind of brings a balance, because of our systems. It kind of creates this distribution of people where there is people at the bottom, and the democratic voice fights for that, and it's a necessity. And if it gets too big at the bottom or too big at the top, the whole thing tips over, and it's bad. But not all is bad. Extremes are bad, and really learning the difference between I guess identity politics and the individual versus the group. There's a lot of parts in that I just started really not agreeing with. I started following some people that, by the left definition, were the extreme oppressed. Whether there's 90 million ways to label it, because that's kind of what they've done. But I started following people that I was like reading their stories, and it's not like a small amount of people. There's a lot of people, you're black and gay or conservative, whatever, that come from these, labeled extreme oppressive situations, but these people completely rose out of adversity, really rose to the top and never used that victim mentality in anything. And every one of these people, and there's hundreds of them on YouTube, you can find so many people that would have been, cast away as, using this card, but they rose to the challenge and overcame, and never used that as an excuse for why they're at where they're at. And that really triggered a thing in my head too. It's like, well, if these people were able to overcome this, then why are so many millions, using these, reasons to not, excel in life, So there's a balance in that, Some of that, yes, of course, is true, but a big majority of it, again, the fat in the middle, it's not. People have the opportunity. I'm sure we all get dealt a different set of cards, but it's really, with the opportunity we have in this country, we can really do something about that. So that's kind of where it's brought me now, and now I see a lot of extremism on the left. Another thing that Jordan talks about is not being able to really identify where you draw the line of extreme left, and it is kind of a hard thing to figure out. But we're seeing these things now. A lot of these things kind of come out where it's not where I was before. It's not where I resonated, and whether transgenderism or feminism or capitalism or patriarchy, all those things, it's getting to a point where it's too extreme, where I couldn't do it anymore, and I had to fully back away, and I'm like, no, that's not me. I'm not fighting for those things anymore, because there's just something not right about it, and it's going to bring us to a bad place, I believe. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what happened with me. And as I got into threads and comments and posts, no matter any time I would get into a more left-leaning conversation and just be respectful and try to write some valid whatever, over and over and over, just getting completely shut out. And and now I'm a guy being called a racist and a bigot and a transphobe. Not every time, but it's happening way more than it should. And it's like, I'm just trying to bring some more additional information to the conversation. I'm not any of those things. And how I'm just getting shut out, and these people on the left, like, it's like they just, the extreme side, there's plenty of logical left people. I'm not saying that all Democrats have completely lost their mind, even though I think a growing number has. But it's definitely really obvious that these people, they can't see, they literally cannot see what they're saying, or that's how it feels. I'm not saying I'm right in every one of my assumptions, but it's really bizarre, and I've had to really back away from it. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of my story. So I don't know where that puts me now. I'm definitely not, I'm just somewhere in the middle. But the extremes, man, if the extreme on either side wins, we all lose, and that's pretty bad. So we got to be careful. So, and the beat goes on. See you later. Thanks for listening.